Here we go. We have Tom Mesereau, one of the great criminal lawyers of our era, best known for successfully defending Michael Jackson in his 2005 case where he beat all of his 14 charges, as well as defending Mike Tyson, Suge Knight, Bill Cosby, and a host of others. Welcome to Vlad TV.
Thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be here.
Well, it's your first time here, so I want to start in the very beginning. So you grew up in West Point, New York?
I was born in West Point, New York. My parents were in the Army. My father was a West Point graduate, the United States Military Academy. My uncle was a West Point graduate. My grandfather was an honorary graduate. And I grew up with close ties to West Point.
Got it. And I guess your father and your uncle wanted you to become a lawyer.
Well, my father always said to me, if you don't know what you want to do, consider law school. It provides a lot of options. And he was absolutely correct. I went to law school not knowing what I wanted to do after law school. I knew I had many opportunities to do something. You can go into business, you can go into government, you can be a prosecutor, you can be a defense attorney, you can go into private practice, big firm, small firm, your own firm. There's so many things you can do with a law degree. In fact, I don't know any other degree that gives you as many options as a law degree does. So my father was correct. He guided me very, very properly.
Okay, and you actually got your undergrad at Harvard.
Yes.
Okay, cum laude.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Then you got your master's in international relations at London.
London School of Economics, yes.
Mm-hmm. And then you got a law degree at Hastings.
In San Francisco, yes.
Gotcha.
You did your homework.
I did my homework. I did my homework. Okay, so you graduate from law school, and then you started different things. You started trying out different things in the area of law. And at first, you started out as a civil litigator?
Yes, I was with a law firm in Washington, D.C. called Hunton & Williams. The main office was Richmond, Virginia. It's a large international law firm now. And I started off as a civil litigator. That's correct.
Okay. And then you became a deputy district attorney.
I became a deputy district attorney in Orange County. I was there for about a year. I was a real fish out of water, and I looked for something else.
Right. And you said that very quickly you saw that prosecution wasn't really a good fit for you.
It was not. And I was really touched by my first experience in the Orange County DA's office. I was assigned to the juvenile court as part of my orientation training, they gave me a tour of the facility. And part of the tour was looking in a window through an iron door into a suicide watch room. And in that room was a little girl sitting by herself, her head in her lap, not saying a word. And I finished my tour, finished my orientation, finished my training, and to my horror, I was asked to prosecute this young girl. It just was traumatizing. It was disturbing. She had been caught shoplifting in a department store. The case could not have been more open and shut. They had her on tape. She admitted doing it. They arrested her and wanted me to prosecute her for a misdemeanor. And I looked at her file, and she'd been the victim of physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. She had a drug problem. The first thing she did when they arrested her was she looked for typewriter fluid to sniff. And I said to myself, why do I want to prosecute this poor little kid? I'd like to get her treatment. I'd like to get her counseling. I'd like to find a way to heal her. And I was forced to prosecute her. It was a trial in front of a judge. It was open and shut. And after it was done, I felt terrible. And I went upstairs to where my colleagues were, and they all wanted to high-five me for winning. And I was disgusted, and I knew then and there I'm not going to last too long in this office.
Okay, and you tried a few other things. You're a transactional lawyer, a civil trial lawyer, but ultimately you became a criminal defense lawyer.
I try, as I said before, a law degree can give you an opportunity to try many things. Now, a lot of lawyers don't have the gumption or the courage to try different things. They get on a treadmill and they never get off it. But I was always willing to try new things if I thought what I was doing was not where I wanted to spend my whole life. So I was a civil litigator. I was a prosecutor. I was assistant to the president of a Getty Oil Company subsidiary, where I ran around supervising law firms around the country. Then I was with a small civil firm, and I began doing criminal work on my own, bringing criminal clients in. The firm was very flexible. They let me do it. And I realized one day, this is where I belong. I like the criminal courts. I like fighting for people's freedom. I like fighting against odds. I like the courtroom. and it just clicked, and that I knew that was where I belonged.
Okay. And so you get into criminal defense. And in the beginning, you started representing a lot of gang members, Crips and Bloods in LA and so forth.
I did, yes.
Okay. And how was that experience?
Well, I began attending a African American church in South LA, First AME Church. I was drawn to Pastor Cecil Murray, a legendary pastor at the church. And I also began to defend a lot of gang members, Crips and Bloods, who were charged usually with murder, sometimes lesser crimes, but usually homicide. And I said to myself one day, the DA's office is just washing these kids right to prison for life. They're washing one after another through. This hardcore gang unit is so driven to arrest and convict and imprison young people that I don't think they're really paying attention to the details. And I think a lot of young people are being rushed to prison because of their race and their socioeconomic class. And I said to myself, how do you win these cases? Because there was such a spiral of gang violence throughout Los Angeles. This is the 90s. And young men were just being gunned down every night in East LA and South LA, you name it. And there was such a dislike for gang violence. It was a problem that they would just basically, if they saw a young kid associated with a gang or wearing blue or wearing red or having a tattoo or a moniker, they would be inclined to arrest them. And what I discovered was that when young alleged gang members, they weren't all gang members, some of them were just showing off, and you had to learn about the gang culture. When they basically put them in front of a jury, primarily of people who were not from South LA or not from East LA, people who were afraid of those neighborhoods, and the prosecutor said, this is a vicious killer, they would convict them in a heartbeat. And they would put on police officers who were called gang experts to tell the jury how many gangs there were and how many homicides there were and how many burglaries there were and how you get jumped into a gang. And all of this was designed, in my opinion, to make sure an alleged gang member didn't get a fair trial. In fact, the LADA's office is the largest district attorney's office in the country. There are over 1,000 DAs. And they have different units. You have special crimes, you have domestic violence, you have the gang unit, the hardcore gang unit, they call it. All of the units in the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office would never bring a case on the basis of one eyewitness identification unless there was some evidence to corroborate it, except the hardcore gang unit. If one person identified someone, even under terribly unreliable conditions, they didn't care if any evidence supported it. They would bring those cases, convict the person, and wash them away to prison for a life sentence. And I was very appalled by the indiscriminate, wholesale way young people were just marched off to prison.
Right. You said I became more effective because I cared. I was able to humanize these kids.
Well, I hadn't grown up in the hood. I hadn't grown up in South LA. I hadn't grown up in East LA. Most of my cases came from South LA. And so I made a point to try and learn about my client. I would visit their home. I would talk to their parents. I would talk to their siblings. I would talk to classmates. I would talk to fellow gang members. I wanted to find out who they were as a human being, how they were raised, what obstacles they faced. And I also wanted to find out what good things they'd done. And it just occurred to me that someone from West LA or Pasadena, parts of LA where you didn't have necessarily the gang problem you had in South LA, they didn't have a clue to these neighborhoods because there's a culture in Los Angeles of not visiting other neighborhoods. We're the most spread out city in the country, and we have a culture of not visiting other neighborhoods. In New York or Chicago, people rub shoulders in the subway. They rub shoulders on the street. They rub shoulders in the crosstown bus. But LA is different. And I just realized what profound ignorance existed between neighborhoods. And if you don't understand a human being, if you don't relate to a human being, if you don't care about a human being, it's so much easier to just feel that you're safer if you convict when the prosecutor says convict. And I would see young white prosecutors, well-educated, blessed in life, referring to every young black kid as a gang member, as a gang banger. They love that term. It offended me. So I would basically try to explain as best I could in a courtroom what happens in these neighborhoods. How people with tattoos aren't necessarily gang members. People with monikers aren't necessarily gang members. How kids come out of their homes and to get to school, they have to deal with gang members. And that actually it's pretty hard to get jumped into a gang. And people will show off and try and do things that don't necessarily mean they're vicious gang members at all. And I would try to humanize. I would put on character witnesses to explain what good people had done, put on family members, try and humanize them every way I could. And I began to have a lot more success defending these cases, and the other lawyers I was watching just lose one trial after another.